The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co-hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you're on air with Reason for Reason, and I'm your host, Ron Yates. You know, there's so much going on in our world that it is difficult to know where to begin. I think I'm going to start down in Texas, where there was a very tragic incident that happened last month. Two 17-year-old boys got into an altercation. And unfortunately, one of those young men lost their life. You know, in America, we're probably the most violent nation on the planet. We certainly incarcerate more people than any 5 industrial nations combined. You know, violence is kind of interwoven into the fabric that makes up America. And in this case, it is a sad testament to what has been happening throughout this country. You know, I'd like to send my condolences to the family of this young man, the Metcalf family down in Frisco, Texas. Their son tragically lost his life. It is an unimaginable tragedy, something that I hope I never experience, the loss of a child. Then there's the other young man that pulled out a knife and stabbed this young man, ending his life. Well, that young man was arrested and is currently out on bail, I guess waiting for his case to move forward through the criminal justice system. But this case, like many others, has taken on a life of its own. It's not really about justice. This case has taken on a racial component. Now, we've known for some time that race is a social construct. Physically, people are pretty much the same. But in America, we have this really bizarre obsession with skin color. Every job application, every college application, everybody wants to know, not if you're an American. I mean, that is one of the first questions they ask. Are you an American? They want to know, well, what sort of American? Are you a dark-skinned American? Are you American that speaks another language? Should that matter? Should that matter in this case? Now, I've been several times around the sun, and I've seen some cases where people that look like me died rather violent, tragic deaths. Sometimes at the hands of police officers and those who are supposed to protect and serve. Sometimes angry mobs. Sometimes a self-appointed block watcher who just decided, I'm not going to let this individual get away with it this time. In that case, and I'm talking about the case from several years back with George Zimmerman, I'm not quite sure what he meant about getting away with it this time. What had Trayvon Martin done to him that will lead him to believe that he's getting away with something? We're just walking through a neighborhood. Well, I can remember when that happened. And to me, it was pretty clear this was a blatant act where Zimmerman was told not to leave his home, not to confront this young man. Instead, George Zimmerman armed himself, walked out, pursued Trayvon Martin, and confronted him. And yet, somehow, the jury said what he did was reasonable. In this case down in Texas, the judge who had initially set bail at $1 million lowered that bail. So people are questioning the judge lowering the bail. Well, according to the U.S. Constitution, bail should be reasonable. So the bail was lowered to $250,000. The family was able to raise the funds, and their son is home, as I said. Yet, there are now people who are threatening the judge, her safety and well-being. Why? She's just following the guidelines established by the U.S. Constitution. And yet, what I find interesting, in this country, we have a long and troubled history relating to people of a darker skin tone. We know about the horrors of slavery. We know about segregation. We know about Jim Crow. We know about lynching. We know about the systematic annihilation of the Native American populations. And yet in this country that has what some might describe as a racist history, curiously, there don't appear to be many racists. I think that some people, they don't consider themselves racist or bigoted if they don't wear a bed sheet and a pillowcase over their face to hide their identity. They're not like them, so they don't consider themselves to be bigoted, to be small-minded. These are the so-called liberal people. These folks, they're the ones that will come out in support of some liberal causes, yet at the same time, they're the same people that will call the police if you're sitting in a park bird watching. And they'll put on an Academy Award-winning performance of how afraid they are, how their life is in jeopardy by a man who's sitting on a bench a distance away. No, they don't consider themselves to be bigoted or racist. Just like the people who will see you sleeping in your college common area and ask the question, well, what are you doing here? Do you belong here? Or the people that will confront you in your building or in your neighborhood. Do you belong in this neighborhood? Do you live here? Those people would never consider themselves to be bigoted. They're not like the others. They're not the kind that would burn a cross on your front yard. They're not the people that will come with a small band and shout the N-word at people, hand out a few flyers, and then go home with some sense of accomplishment. They're not like them. Yet, those same people have taken advantage of the programs and the advantages that were handed to them by their ancestors. There are people that say, well, you know what? Everything is equal now. Since we had the first president that is clearly of African descent, there were others before him, but since we had Obama, well, everything is equal now. Well, let's just do a little examining, shall we? Equal means the same. Is everyone the same? Are two people, even identical twins, exactly the same? No, folks, nothing in America in terms of treatment is the same. It's never been. You know, when you have a conversation, you have to have a real, open, and honest conversation. And that's not something that America has. Why? Because they don't want to rip the scab off the wounds. So we don't have debates on critical race theory. In fact, we have a president that wants to essentially erase Black history. He's at war with certain colleges and universities about their curriculum, what you can teach in your university. In America, we've been banning books. That's something that the Nazis did. And we sent millions of troops into Europe to liberate Europe, to end the nightmare that was the Nazi regime. And now we're doing it. You know, this case, this tragedy, is just that is an American tragedy. But we can't see it as that. We have to view everything through the lens of black and white. Or should I say black, brown, and white. And you know, certain things or certain events have been equalizers. I think for our generation, one of the biggest was the events of 9/11. Every community pretty much across this nation was equally terrified, uncertain and unsure of what would happen next. But after a few months or a year or so, we began to head back to our neutral corners, if you will, back to our areas of comfort, back to the realization that no, I'm better than this person simply because my skin is lighter. Then we had the pandemic. Again, terror, fear, people assisting one another, trying to bring hope and healing to those who were affected. Well, as time went on and we began to get a hold on this pandemic, again, the country drifted apart again. Part of it is, of course, our media. And realistically, it is what is woven into the fabric of America. And if you read the Constitution says that black people are just 3/5 human. Where did they get that from? Who came up with that theory? But if you can marginalize a people, if you can denigrate them, then it's pretty easy to kill them, to lock them away in prisons and throw away the key. It's easy to put them on a plane and send them to a country they've never been to. And even when a mistake is made, it's easy to say, well, it's not our mistake. Or we can't do anything about assisting in his return to the United States. You know, you ask yourself, in a country like America, we're supposed to be a progressive country, the leader of the free world. Yet, are we really progressing? Or are we going backwards? A couple of weeks back, our illustrious president signed an executive order that basically says that people now can reserve the right to discriminate. The civil rights law that ended things like white-only water fountains, white-only bathrooms, or white-only sections of restaurants and buses. Well, now that is all changed with the stroke of a pen. We're not progressing, folks. We're heading in the wrong direction. And in this case is somewhat familiar to me because we've seen this over and over, where young black men or women, older black men and women were killed. And again, it was seen obvious, the outcome, that this was blatant, this was clear. And we would be hopefully optimistic that this time there'll be justice. How many times have we been disappointed? I think there's a belief in this country that certain people reserve the right to do unto others, but not have it done to them. And when it happens to them, it becomes a tragedy, a major event. You know, it's interesting. All the things that we've done to people in this country and around the world, now that it's happening to us, now all of a sudden, it's a problem. It's something that the government needs to address. Now we have these demonstrations across the country. Where were these demonstrations years ago, before Trump was elected the first time? And even going back before Trump, when the government was out of control, when the government was grabbing more and more power for the president, for Congress, for the Supreme Court. Where was the outrage? When the market nearly crashed in 2008 and people were losing everything, jobs, homes, everything they worked for, where was the outrage? Where were the protests? One man comes to Washington, turns Washington upside down, and all of a sudden, thousands of people descend on Washington to stop the steal. You didn't stop them when they were stealing from you, picking your pockets clean. That you accepted. But you wanted to protect one man. And now that man that you wanted to protect, that you put everything on the line for, that man now, he's giving you exactly what you asked for. I saw the other day where a young man, Caucasian young man, Trump supporter, he was on social media talking about the possibility of him losing his farm. He talked about the government taking away his livelihood, but he would never say who it was that was taking this privilege away from him. He never mentioned the name Trump. Maybe he still has some faith and belief that by some miracle, Trump will change his mind, change directions, and he'll be able to go back to life as he knew it. But that's not likely to happen. So I just think that when we were told on multiple occasions about being patient and waiting for justice to play out, I know it's agonizing for the families down in Texas to do so. But that's something that has been told to the Black and brown and poor community for centuries. Just wait. Just let the justice system play out. Let there be an investigation. Nowadays, we pretty much know what the investigation is going to show. So that's all I'm going to say about that. This is an American tragedy. Just as the other day we had a school shooting, another school shooting. When are we going to do something about that, about protecting America's future, its children? Well, let's talk a little bit about America and what's happening and the direction this country's headed in with our current leadership. Our president, Donald Trump, is making no secret of it that he wants to isolate the Chinese regime. He's been in contact, or his administration has been in contact with 70 different countries. And in exchange for reduced tariffs, they will isolate China. In other words, not trade with the Chinese government. I think that is a huge mistake, and for a number of reasons. But let's start with this one. In World War II, or prior to the start of World War II, the Japanese had no intention of attacking the United States. Furthest thing from their mind. The Japanese were establishing a base of power in the Pacific. They were, let's be realistic, invading countries in the Pacific Rim, expanding the Japanese empire. Japanese probably looked at America and said, you know what, this is a big country. Millions, hundreds of millions of people. Do we really want to fight with them? But our government decided that they were going to isolate the Japanese, that they were going to deny them access to oil. Well, of course, oil is a vital resource. Can't fight a war without oil. Japanese did not have much choice. They decided that they were going to cripple America's Pacific Fleet, thus the attack on Pearl Harbor. That was over 80 years ago. Now we have a president that wants to isolate China. China, a much larger country than Japan, more than 1 billion Chinese, arguably the largest economy on the planet. China in control of 70% of the world's rare earth minerals. China that underwrites a huge portion of America's debt. And that's who you want to isolate? I think that if we continue down this course, it's a possibility it could lead to a conflict, a very serious conflict. For several years, the Chinese have been building their military capabilities. The Chinese have established economic bases all around the world. Their influence stretches across all of Africa, Europe, the Far East, and even in this hemisphere in places like Venezuela. Unfortunately, our president doesn't really seem to think very much. He's more reactionary. He wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to try this and see how it works. And even when it is clear it's not working very well, he's very slow to reverse course. He decided that he would pause the tariffs for about 90 days. But what about all the damage that's been done already? What about all the people who had their 401ks wiped out? Those that don't have pensions? Those people that have been fired, that have yet to return to work, how are they faring? Does that indicate something that was well thought out, a well thought out plan? You're trying to revive the economy by firing people, by raising tariffs that will only increase the cost to the American consumer? Where's the thinking in that? And yet, no one seems to be able to, I guess, reason with this man, because he thinks he knows it all. He's got it all figured out. Yet look at the conditions in America. He ran on the fact that Biden was not addressing things like the southern border, that Biden was doing nothing to bring down the cost of things like groceries. to tackle inflation. And yet, what has he done to address inflation and the high cost of things like groceries? And of course, now that he has instituted these tariffs, costs across the board are going to go up as if they're not high enough already. And yet, this is the man that's going to make America great again. Is that really the plan? Or is the plan to enrich those like himself? The other day, he was bragging about how much money he made when the stock market rebounded. He had a bunch of ultra wealthy people in the White House, and he was pointing out how much money each one made, either individually or for their corporation. Hundreds of millions of dollars. But what about the working class and the poor? How are they faring? These are the people that supported Donald Trump. These are the people that took their few dollars that they could muster and sent them off to the Trump campaign. These are the people that went out and bought the MAGA hats, the MAGA t-shirts. These are the people that showed up at his rallies to listen to him spew his hate and his venom. Never once did they think that they would be the victims. They didn't mind if people were being illegally deported to El Salvador. That didn't bother them because they said it would never be us. They didn't care about people losing their jobs because, again, it won't be us. They didn't care about Medicaid and Medicare and other social programs being cut for particular communities because, again, he won't cut from us. Now, some of those very same people, as I said, are taken to the airwaves. I saw a clip on Facebook where a man wearing a MAGA hat is out with a sign begging for food. I don't know. I think there's a contradiction in terms when you have somebody that supported a president that said he's going to make America profitable again. And yet here you are out on the streets with a sign for food, urging people to give you money to buy food. Trump fooled a lot of people. And I think that now people are beginning to wake up. I think it is, in some respects, too little too late. There's going to be more protesting. But when has protesting been effective in this country? We march and we'll go and we'll have these large rallies and, we'll take to the airwaves, social media. But what changes? I saw something interesting. For the women's movement, in the early 70s, there was a bill put before Congress called the ERA, or the Equal Rights Amendment. I think that bill hit the Senate floor around 1970. So we're talking about 55 years ago. Do you know that bill has never been signed? Why would this nation of laws, this nation that says all men are created equal, why would they not want equality for the women that give us our children, that teach our children, that maintain the homes, the communities? Why? And we're talking about Caucasian women. Why would they not be considered equal. If everything is equal in this country, if everything is the same, there's so many of us in this country that have deluded ourselves into believing that everything is the same, that everything is equal. There's people now that want to be the victims. You know, there's a men's movement where men are saying that they are the victims of things like reverse discrimination. There's a group that is angry with women, saying that women don't fight in wars, at least not to the same extent as men. How women, if there's an emergency, say on a ship, women and children would get into the lifeboats first. So these men are angry about that. How can you be angry about the laws and the customs that you created? I don't see the rationale there. Then you have something called reverse racism, where again, white men are saying, well, wait, we're the victims. Well, here's my question to you. 1964, 1965, the Civil Rights Act, followed by the Voting Rights Act. Who wrote the legislation to grant voting rights, civil rights? What was the makeup of the Congress in the mid 1960s? Do you think black people wrote that particular legislation? Do you think black people would have settled for just a quota that would only grant access to a small portion of the black community? Do you think we were satisfied with that after the deaths of Dr. King, Malcolm X, and a slew of others? Hell, we wanted a lot more. It was just a good thing for many of our white counterparts that we didn't get together and reorganize after Dr. King was killed and made real demands of this government. They had to take Malcolm out because Malcolm made it clear by any means necessary. And if we would have decided that we're going to have our freedom and our equality by any means necessary, America may have been a very different place today. But as it relates to reverse racism, I'd like somebody to call into the station. The number here is 888-304-4401. Again, 888-304-4401. And name for me one corporation that is under the sole control of black people. And then tell me what corporation has denied a white man access to a job. When did we do that? When did we say, oh no, your children can't go to school at this particular school district? When did we have redlining that says, no, you can't get a loan to buy a house in this neighborhood? When did we do that? People talk about discrimination as it relates to colleges, to attending colleges, where some colleges and universities gave additional points to people of color. And of course, people became upset about that. They couldn't get into a particular college because they said, well, quotas were set up for black students. But who set the quotas up? Was it the black students? Or was it people that look like exactly the same people complaining today about racism? We have a call coming in. Caller, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, what's going on, brother Ron?
Hey, Kendall, how you doing?
What's happening, babe?
Just making it do what it do.
You know, there are no companies that are 100% owned. Well, large corporations anyway. There aren't any that's owned by African Americans.
That I know, right? And I was trying to bring out the fact that we don't own the corporations. We're not the ones that are denying people access to jobs, to upward mobility. That's not us. These folks are told. So Caucasian men, and we're talking about the mid 60s when the civil rights legislation and the voting rights legislation was designed or written. What you had was a group of predominantly white men over the age of 50 in control of Congress. They're the ones that wrote this legislation. And yet now you have people saying, I'm sorry?
My question is, what's changed?
Well, now you have a more diverse Congress, right? You have women, you have, black people, you have Native Americans, right, who are in the halls of power. During that time, simply did not happen. You had white men over the age of 50 who were dictating their policies and belief and imposing it on people across this country. But if you what you have is Caucasian men who are writing the laws, who are creating these quota systems and who are denying other Caucasian men access to jobs and upward mobility, how can you get mad at black people, at brown people, at poor people?
They use it as a target. That's all. It's a scapegoat. That.
I get that, and that's what I'm trying to bring out.
Remember Reconstruction? They're coming to take our jobs. That's what the white guys said about the people that were enslaved, that are no longer enslaved, that had freedom. The first thing they screamed was, they're coming to take our jobs. They're coming to rape our women and our wives, and thieves, and murderers. That's an old tale, right? That's been going round and round for a minute.
Well, yeah, that's basically what Trump is saying right now about the people he's actively deporting. And as it relates to deportations, Trump, I guess, not really paying attention to the fact that the mics were open. He said the other day to the president of El Salvador, he said to him that you need to build about 5 more prisons, because now Trump is vowing to send what he calls violent American criminals to El Salvador. Right. There was a time in this country where at least we would feign due process, right? Where at least you would get a hearing. Probably it may not go in your favor, but at least you would get a hearing, some semblance of justice. Now they skip right over that. You're put on a plane and you are disappeared. Basically, we have reverted to the days of the slave catchers, where there is no due process. There is no right to an attorney. You are simply grabbed up off the street, put into a car, loaded onto a bus, and next thing you know, you're headed to an airport to be taken to a country that you've never been in and a language you don't speak.
When you speak out against the government, they don't like you. Like in Russia, what do? They pack you in a bag and send you up to a Siberian prison if they don't like what you have to say. But aren't we doing kind of like the same thing? I know it's another country, but it's like they're buying slaves from us, and they're gonna end up being slaves down in El Salvador.
Well, yeah. We're paying the El Salvadoran government to house these criminals. Now, why would we pay El Salvador to house these prisoners when we have prisons right here in this country? To save the cost of maintaining a prisoner, well, you're paying for their maintenance anyway, but you're paying El Salvador. So what is the purpose of doing this, right? It's not cost effective. Why not just send them back to their countries and let their country's justice system deal with them? Why would we, the taxpayers, have to shell out hundreds of millions of dollars to build prisons and then to maintain those prisons in other countries. What sense does that make?
I guess once they're in the other country, then the bill is no longer on us. It's on the other country to do what they want to take care of them.
No, but we're
That
paying.
would be the only thing I would see. You're talking about housing these people in prison or keeping them incarcerated for a very long time, a very, very long time, which means that would constantly cost the taxpayers a lot of dollars, right?
And that's what we're doing. We are paying.
El Salvador has to take up the tab.
No. We are paying the El Salvadoran government to house these prisoners. That's why Trump said you need to build about 5 more prisons. Well, where's the money going to come from? Is El Salvador a rich country? So the money is going to come from the United States.
My question is, how can that be legal? How can that be legal in any sense of the word? I mean, you're taking American citizens, still American citizens that you want to take, and deport them to another country to be in prison. How can anything be legal about that?
Well, here's the thing.
Or constitutional?
We're talking about Donald Trump, right? Trump has a very interesting relationship with legalities, right? For Trump, it doesn't matter what's legal. For him, it's what can I get away with? And because the Supreme Court, which basically signs off on whatever Trump wants to do, and the Congress is basically trying to tell us essentially to ignore what's going on,
but
right?
We can fight back. Apparently, we're not doing so, but we do have the means to fight back, legally or whatever. I mean, we just got to fight dirty, just like they're fighting. I don't know what's wrong with the Democratic Party. They need to get in there and they need to fight dirty, just like the Republicans do.
Well, here's the thing, right? For the Democrats, they haven't had a backbone in some time now. I mean, they do dirty things, right? But as it relates to fighting dirty, they want to be the party that is viewed as we go high when they go low, right? It's a stupid tactic, and it's not working. Right now, the Democratic Party, their approval ratings in the 20s, the 20 percentile, and they're not getting.
You know what they do? I get the emails and the text messages all the time. They're always asking for a donation. Send me $5. Send me $15. Send me. I want to see action.
Well,
If I already donated to these people, at this point, me being an American citizen, I'm ready to start to see some action. But other than the protest, I know we're going to have the protest this weekend, right? On Saturday, it's the big national protest, right?
uh-huh.
So, other than just protesting does do things. I mean, you scream loud enough, and somebody's going to hear you. I mean, they kind of messed around with Elon Musk because they burnt up his cars over there in New York, and then he had to close that dealership, and he also had to close the dealership in Maryland. And him and Trump, now they're at odds. So the protesting has brought something there, something to the table. I'm just wondering how far is it gonna go far enough?
It's not, right? Unfortunately, in this country, right, what people understand is meeting force with force, right? And we'll do it to each other. We kill each other constantly, right? But as it relates to fighting against our government, we hesitate to do that, right? Even though our government is basically invalidating the Constitution, violating people's rights, we think we're going to get justice through the courts. Well, what? Trump has thousands of lawsuits currently pending and working their way through the courts. What have we done with that? Nothing. Trump basically ignores judicial orders.
Well, that's
right.
The Republicans are in office. They can do whatever they want.
Well,
you get the whole lot of noise. You can't do this. You can't do that. Don't do this. They get in office. They pretty much do what they want. If they want to burn the country down or the world like they're trying to do now, they do it and get away with it.
Right.
And there's like no ramification. It's like there's no justice. Everything is lawless right now.
And that's why we're not going to do much with these protests. In fact, what's going to happen is I can pretty much see it already. Eventually, the government will begin to crack down on dissent. They've been doing it already, right? You know, these two college students, the doctoral student from Tufts University and the other one, Mahmoud Khalil, right? All they were doing was speaking out against Israel's occupation of Gaza. And Mahmoud Khalil is being deported. What crime he committed in this country? Doesn't matter. The courts have sided. The courts have sided with the president, and the same thing with the doctoral student from Tufts. She's still being held in a prison in Louisiana.
All of that's not familiar. What I hear is that Sharia laws, like, what do they call that? Like, you go against the government, you're out. If you're in South or North Korea, you go against the government, you're taken out. Even in the Castro, same thing. You speak out against the government, you will disappear. Especially if you're Russian and you speak out against the government.
But you know something?
Disappear in another country.
But you know something? That's what happens in this country too, right? We've been doing it just as long, maybe even before the Russians, before North Korea, right? If you spoke out against the government, you disappeared or you died. Where's Dr. King? Where's Malcolm X? Right? And there's a whole list of men and women who spoke out against the government. But it's the same thing, right? But it's the same thing. You are disappearing. You're taking someone away, either killing them or locking them away. Some of the Black Panthers are still locked up after 60 years in jail, you know, and other groups, right? So we've been disappearing people. We can't talk about China. We can't talk about Russia. We can't talk about North Korea because we've been doing it here. You know what I mean? Right. You know, where's Medgar Evers? Where is Emmett Till? And the list goes on and on and on. People disappearing, including the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and his brother. People disappearing. So we can't talk about other countries because we've mastered it. And a lot of the stuff that absolutely, and a lot of stuff that
sticking our nose in everybody else's business too.
Right. A lot of stuff that Hitler did, he got the ideas from right here. Mm-hmm.
You've orchestrated a lot of things all over the world, Africa, here, all these countries, man. We played a part in every little thing that goes on in those countries. We're right there with it.
Well, and now these countries are saying enough is enough. Particularly China and, you know, a host of others are saying, you know, we're not going to bow down to America. And, you know,
I mean, that would be all right with Trump because he wants to be a separatist anyway.
But it won't be all right because while we are placing these crazy tariffs on China, the other day, I think yesterday, the premier of China was in Vietnam meeting with the Vietnamese leadership. And what they're going to do, they're going to trade amongst themselves. They're working on trade agreements with Japan and other countries, right? So what they're going to do is they're just going to, you know, eliminate the middleman, which would be America, and trade amongst themselves. And right now, exactly, because they've lost faith and trust in America, that America would follow through on its promises. You have to understand something. The Ukraine government had nuclear weapons. They reached an agreement with NATO and the United States if they gave up their weapons that we would protect them in the event of a war. And now we have a president that has told Ukrainians, oh, well, you're just out of luck. You don't have the cards. So, you know, we are ruining our reputation around the world, which hasn't been good for in a long time. But now it is toxic and it's only going to get worse. And in this country, as more and more people begin to wake up, you know, there was a movie that came out last year. Well, it is. But, you know, there was a movie that came out about a year ago called Civil War. I don't know if you saw it, but I think if you haven't, you need to watch it. Because what they have is a man who looks pretty similar to Donald Trump, who was an authoritarian, and eventually the country goes to war. Now, if you're going to watch the movie, I don't want to give too much away, but I think it's important to see. I think it's important to see this movie. Yeah, yeah. I think you should see this movie, and particularly how it ends.
And when was
Right?
it made? It was made what 2024 or
2023, 2024, but it's called Civil War, and I think you need to watch that because sometimes movies kind of give us insight into what's going to happen. And this country was not liberated by legislation. This country fought the British. And this country is not going to be liberated. You're not going to be able to legislate the damage Trump has done. You're not going to be able to legislate that away. Right? And in a country where you have people armed to the teeth and who've been preparing for war, what they thought would be a race war, I think now they're coming to realize that it ain't about race right now. It's about survival. And what Trump is doing is placing us all in jeopardy. But
And you talk about assassinations, that's why they got rid of Fred Hampton.
and that's you're making my point. So many people were disappeared, right? One after the other, particularly in the 1970s when you had the civil rights movement and so many other movements that were going on, kind of that sprang up after the civil rights movement. So this country has done this. We got rid of the Chinese. We let them build the railroads and we got rid of them. We interred the Japanese. We slaughtered the indigenous population, enslaved black people, denied rights to poor white people, and still denying rights to women. So we're no better
And
than
poor white people.
that's what I
black
just
people,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
indigenous people,
Yeah.
and anyone that has less than 7 or 8 years a year.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is about that time. I thank you for calling in. Always a pleasure. And we're going to have to wrap this up, right? It's been another thoughtful Thursday.
How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
All right, brother.
All right, peace.
Peace. So, folks, it's been another thoughtful Thursday. And I hope that those listeners will get something from what was said today. Don't just take my word for it. Do your research. Find out who you elected to be the president of this country and leader of the free world. Folks, knowledge is power. And without the knowledge, you're powerless. Take back your power and go and learn and understand what's happening in this country and what's happening around the world. So it's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you again next Thursday right here in Genesis Radio.